Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which will be the first in the Achieving the 2030 Climate Goals series. My name is Mara Oprah. I am a business analyst with GNE Finance, and I will be moderating today's session, which will focus on one-stop shops for the residential sector, created under the umbrella of the Turnkey Retrofit and Europace H2020 projects. The section is co-hosted by GNE Finance and BPIE, and just to provide you with a little bit of background on us, GNE Finance is a high-impact investment company that designs and operates home renovation programs with examples in Catalonia, which one of our speakers, Kristina, will be discussing, the Basque Country, and the Balearic Islands in Spain. Across Europe, we provide advisory services when it comes to financing and program setup, and we work with cities and regions in the Netherlands, Portugal, the UK, Italy, Belgium, and Spain. And as I'm sure many of you know, BPIE is an independent think tank on energy performance of buildings, which aims to create a climate neutral building environment aligned with the ambitions of the Paris Agreement and in support of a fair and sustainable society. I'd like to now present today's speakers. Next slide, please. So today we have Jonathan Volt, the project manager at BPIE, as well as Hugo Vigneron, president at Operene, and Kristina Klimovich, head of advisory and consulting at GNE Finance. If you have any questions for the speakers today, please use the question box in the webinar. And lastly, just some admin, this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be shared with you after the end of the event. And it's good to know that the presentation is also in the handout section, so you can download it if you'd like. Prior to beginning the session, we'd like to take a poll to try and understand our audience a bit better. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So in your personal experience, what is the largest limiting factor as to why you would not renovate your house holistically? You'd have to select one option, and the options are as follows. It is difficult to find reliable contractors. I do not know what works can be done or what works are necessary. Grants and permits are difficult to navigate or obtain. I do not want to take a loan out to finance renovation works, or other. We'll just wait a minute or two for answers to start coming in, and to make sure that everyone has a chance to actually log in and to attend the session. Just a bit longer. For those of you who are new and are just logging on, if you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to ask them in the questions box in GoToWebinar. Okay, and we have the results of the poll. So the majority of people think it is difficult to find reliable contractors. Afterwards, they do not want to take a loan out to finance renovations, followed closely by not understanding what works need to be done within the house to have a green renovation, as well as other. Grants and permits seem to be at the bottom of this list, but hopefully we'll be able to provide you with the ways how to mitigate these issues in the future with our presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to present Jonathan Volt, who will be speaking about the Turnkey Retrofit project.
All right, thank you, Mara. And hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I'm a project manager at BPIE, as Mara said. I'm here. I was invited here today to present on a study we did a couple years ago for the Turnkey Retrofit project, in which the project was to benchmark promising experience of integrated renovation services in Europe. So basically, we looked at promising models of one-stop shops, and we tried to derive some lessons learned from that. And I will tell you a bit more about the project in a couple of slides, but if we can go to the next slide, please. I would first like to set the scene. Why are we here today and talk about one-stop shops? Most of you are aware of the problems we face when we talk about decarbonizing the European building stock. We still have a very low renovation rate. We have an insufficient renovation depth, meaning that most renovation don't bring the needed energy savings. Renovations are often also perceived as complex, costly, and time-consuming, which often is also the case. But this is a problem because it's a barrier to get people to renovate. The selected measures when people renovate are also too often suboptimal, meaning that the quality might be too low because people look more at the price than at the quality, or it's installed in the wrong way because the contractors were not good enough or not reliable enough. And this leads that you don't get the achieved energy saving or satisfaction that you want from your renovation and that you paid for in the beginning. And also, in general, the level of trust in renovation advice or in the actors involved in renovations, so construction workers and so on, as well as the expected savings that we might promise through the energy performance certificate recommendations and so on. People don't trust this enough, which is another barrier to increasing the renovation rate, depth, as well as quality across Europe. And if we click one more, I have then what one-stop shop brings to the table and why I think it's a relevant topic to discuss here. First of all, they can trigger renovation by smart packaging of the technical as well as the financial solution of the renovation. They can targeting the messages to the individuals to really sell the idea of a renovation. They can enable a smooth renovation process or renovation journey, as I will call it later, by really bringing together all the different components in the renovation process. So all the, including the technical diagnosis, but also align all the different actors that are involved in renovating a building. So instead that you need to quit your job and be like a renovation project manager, the one-stop shop should be able to do all this for you, and therefore allow a smoother journey for you. And I think one-stop shop as well it's really opportunity to adapt the renovation plan to the needs and preferences of the end users, and by doing that also lead to higher satisfactions. I'll come back to that in a bit, but the two last ones, one-stop shops can really also have the expertise of innovative financing models such as energy performance contracts that are difficult to solve on your own, or find the perfect ESCO yourself, as well as what I think is most important is that they can be a brand that is connected with trust in your city, that if I contact this one-stop shop, they will point to me to the right contractors. They will ensure that the quality is what I set out to do and what I'm paying for. And if we go to the next one, I will just say a couple words about the projects and what we're trying to do. We BPIE, joined forces with 8 partners, including Operene and Hugo, in France, Spain, and Ireland. And this is a Horizon 2020 project, I should say. And what we're really trying to do is take 2 one-stop shop models in France. Operene is one, and then the other one was called EasyGlue, now is called Hero. And on trying to develop elements that can improve these models, and also take these elements in a second step and replicate them in Ireland and Spain. And the project will end next year, and I think we will have a lot of interesting lessons learned from the project that can be useful in the renovation rate and in the development of one-stop shops in the future. And I think if we go to the next one, okay, now I get into it. Now I've set the scene. But one of the first things we did in the Turnkey was to do this benchmarking study. And what we basically did was to analyze in a structured way 9 of the most promising or interesting one-stop shops or renovation services in Europe. And this includes then Hero, Operene, and Octave in France, Serie in Spain, Super Homes and Pro Energy Homes in Ireland, Better Homes in Denmark, and Agisprong in Netherlands. Some of you might say that it's a wider model than a one-stop shop, but they do include all the components that a one-stop shop do. They bring together the financial, the technical, as well as the construction value chain in one package, and therefore we included it. And finally, the retrofit works in the UK. And I think an important point, you see an excerpt from the benchmarking here to the right, and in the report that I think is available here in the handouts. This is much longer and it tells a lot of interesting information. But what it also shows is that all the models are very diverse in the terms of the purpose, the revenue stream, the organizational structure, right? But who is the owner? Is it the public? Is it local authorities, or is it private owners or someone else? The renovation solutions that they provide, as well as how they set up the collaboration between the one-stop shop and different construction value chain actors and other stakeholders. And what we really try to do is to provide insight into what makes a one-stop shop really work. And I think we go to the next one, in which we mapped out a generic renovation journey for multifamily buildings from the one-stop shop side to really identify which are the different services the one-stop shop needs to provide, and when in the journey do they need to provide this. I won't have time to go through all of them, but the first one is to, of course, attract the customer. For a multifamily building, this might be to pitch an idea to the right people. But for a single family building, it can be a website, or it can be that for multifamily buildings as well, but something that attracts your interest. It can even be a communication campaign that leads you into the idea of, I want to renovate. And that is where the journey starts from the one-stop shop. Then you do the diagnosis, which is different from multifamily. Then you probably do an audit for a single family. The first diagnosis might be that you insert data in a portal and you get like a first estimation, or it's a calculation based on existing EPC data or something else. Then you define the program, you conceptualize it, you select professionals. All this differ a bit depending on what kind of building it is. I would say the scope of the project rather than buildings, but yeah. And then you do the renovation works and the follow up. And the main point here is that the one-stop shop should really be involved in all these steps, making sure that from the moment that you show the interest to renovate, or even before that, to create this interest, to that you have really done the work, and to even beyond that, to when you have the follow-up work, making sure that the person or the owner and the tenants are satisfied with the work. The one-stop shop should really be involved and engaged, and even hold the hand of the building owner throughout this journey, making sure that they don't, what we say, drop off making sure that the conversion rate throughout the journey is high, and we really get the renovation from the work we put in. And if we go to the next one, and I hope I'm not taking way too much time, but these are some of the conclusions from the report that I want to highlight here. To become successful throughout this journey, we identified that one-stop shops really need to build a strong network with the local actors, and as I said, be the single point contact for the homeowners or throughout the renovation works to make sure that people are happy. On the last one, I think it's important, or the third one, I think it's important that the one-stop shop does not sell individual components and install them, but they sell the service of a better home or a higher performing building, and to make sure that this is also something that leads to high satisfaction in the end. Minimize unpleasant surprises for the customers. So as I said before, making the customer journey smoother. Have a strong online platform to get people really interested. First, as I said in the first, to attract the customer, this can be a way, but also a strong online platform can also be an instrument to really plan the work of the construction value chains to make sure that the project planning goes in a smooth way as well, so that it doesn't take too much. So it doesn't. There is a gap between the second and the third step of the renovation, and the renovation then take a couple of years, because that will have a negative effect on the satisfaction, of course. And consider different revenue stream. This is something we saw as well, and I think there are many ways to fund a one-stop shop, and I think depending on the services and so on, but I think a combination of revenue streams is a good way to consider. And of course, facilitate effective collaboration among the professionals. As I said, I think a one-stop shop is only as good as the people they involved. So the construction value chain, the expert, and everything, because that is what will influence the quality of the renovation in the end. And the next one, I will just show you what we did with all this information. We created what is called, we took a business model canvas from internet, from marketing books basically, and we filled this based on the models, based on interesting things from the models we analyze. And I think what you see is that they are very diverse in most things, in the key activities that they provide. In best case, they provide all of this, but they provide different things, such as the initial online evaluation of the renovation potential, the diagnosis or the energy audit of the building, putting together the renovation package, including both the technical and the financial parts, finding the right professionals for the end users, as well as in some cases train this involved experts to make sure that or professionals to make sure that the people you put in contact with the people that will renovate are of high quality, and that they do the best kind of work, as well as issuing energy performance certificates is something some one-stop shops do. And I won't go through all of this, but the value proposition, I think, was the most common one. It's really to provide hassle-free renovations, ensure that the work is really high quality and reliable, and that the service is customer oriented. And that is really more of a service than a place where you buy single products and so on. The next one, and I just have some recommendations here for, because this was question raised from some of you before the webinar. So what can we learn for the renovation wave? And this is actually a report I'm working on right now together with the University of Galway, which is involved in the work, and it will be published in a couple months. But just a couple things here. I think it's important to say that it's not a single bullet solution but it's a necessary component in an effective policy mix, because I think if the renovation wave will go on as we wanted to see, we will have a much larger demand for renovation, especially deep renovation, and one-stop shops is really the enabler of this. That it really answers the question, how do we do this? And as I said, the service is only as good as its weakest link. You really need to have a strong connection with local actors and really contribute to the quality that they provide and really monitor the quality they provide as well. And be adapted to the local market. Of course, it's not possible to have one-stop shop for all, but we can replicate certain aspects of one-stop shops to other markets, such as the digital solutions and interoperability between the one-stop shop service and such as the EPC database and digital billing logbooks, which are two other provisions mentioned in the renovation wave text. And if you click one more time, I have a couple more. They can also enable district solutions, such as enabling an aggregation of renovations. So you find out there's 500 people in the same area that need a similar approach. Then you could possibly industrialize this approach and save cost and money. Involve a wide range. I don't think one-stop shop should be either public or private, but both. They should involve a wide range of actors, and I think they should have involvement from the local public authorities, but also from local banks and other professionals. Okay, the last thing I would say here is that I think one-stop shops is one of the occasions when we really have the opportunity to talk with the building owners and the people doing the renovation. And I think it's a great opportunity to really pitch the idea of deep renovations, and building a renovation passport can be one way to really show how they do that. But I think that is an important point. And yeah, and if we go to the next one, this is my last slide. And I would just say that, yeah, I think one-stop shops, they will become even more relevant. I think we need a one-stop shop in every city in Europe. I think they should consider widen their scope, integrate other types of expertise such as aesthetics, architects, indoor environmental quality, life cycle analysis, legal advice, and so on. And they should already start now to move from being a niche idea to become a mainstream idea. And on Turnkey Retrofit, it is wrapping up, and you will find everything on our website. And on Mara, if you click one more time, and on the solution for renovation website, you can already now test some of the solutions that we have developed, especially on the French version, I think. And that is it for me. And I'm sorry if I took a bit more than my 15 minutes. And I'm looking forward to answer your questions later.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was really informative. For those of you who are interested, the benchmarking study is available under the Handouts tab in the control panel, so you can feel free to download this. And if you have any questions, again, please submit them in the questions tab. We will address all questions at the end of everyone's presentation in a somewhat lengthy discussion. Hugo, if you'd like, I'd like to move on to you. Sorry, Hugo, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Cool. So hi everyone, I'm Hugo from Operene. So I will start just for a quick presentation of Operene, who we are, what we do, and then we'll discuss about the multifamily building retrofit. So if you can move to the next slide. Yes. So Operene is a private company. We are based in Lyon, which is roughly in the middle of France. And we are really active in collective buildings, so multifamily building, but also in some tertiary public building. And our DNA is to work on deep renovation. So we are not here for just doing one, I don't know, external insulation or boiler changing. We are here to do a global renovation. And we do that because it's more interesting for the client, for the energy performance, and also for the asset value. And we have a kind of an innovative way to do this work, because we work in coordination with a lot of small and medium company, so construction company, and we applied all together for a project. And Operene is here to do the coordination of this network. And if we start with a deep renovation project and we have all the good companies that are selected and coordinated by Operene, at the end we are more confident in and we can guarantee the energy performance. So it's called the energy performance contract. So that's a contract, but before that we have to do all the work and then do the operating and maintenance of the building in order to every year follow the guarantee and get the energy reduction. So that's what we do in Operene, and especially in the multifamily building in the private sector, but also in the public sector with social housing, for instance. You can move to the other slide. But if we look at the private sector, if we want to describe what we do and what are the renovation journey in the private sector, so we are basically 5 steps. So we have to know that, as Jonathan explained before, in collective building there are several actors working on different steps of the project. And for instance, they separate the design phases and the construction phases. So we are more on the side of the construction phases. And normally we've been asked to do some work program. So we have a refurbishment project which has been designed by an architect, sometimes a surveyor, sometimes thermal study engineers, and sometimes all of them. It depends on the situation of the multifamily building. And what we do, so we get the program of the refurbishment, and then we have to select each company that are specialized in each work. So we try to aggregate this company and to get the best consortium for this project. So each project are different. So we have each team are different. And then we are here to construct the offer. So in terms of cost, in terms of planning or energy objective. And then once we get the project, so because the client think we are the most efficient way to do is renovation, then we do the supervision of the work during the construction phases. And at the end, and also during the construction phases, we do a lot of quality control in order to be sure that we can guarantee the performance after the work, and also just to ensure to the different clients that we have you will have a very efficient renovation project. And that's really important, this last aspect, because as Jonathan explained before, sometimes there is some suspicion on the quality of the work. So it's really important to do some tests, so we are able to see if the renovation will be efficient enough. And it's also a security for us, because if we want to guarantee the performance after the work, it's better to correct if we see that the performance is not met during the work. It's always easier to correct something when there is everyone on the field, rather than going afterward and 1 year after trying to fix something in the insulation or whatever. So if you go to the other slide, so if I try to put some key figure about what we do and the multifamily building renovation. So because there is a cost of this kind of coordination, so the Operene task, we target multifamily building, but at least with a work package around 500K. Otherwise, it will be not very relevant to do a job of coordination. So it means that we have to at least to get a certain size of multifamily building, so that there is a real need for coordination. And when there is a, I would say, starting from 20 dwellings, for instance, and it's important also for us, if we want to apply an energy performance contract, it's important to have several dwellings, because we do the average of all the behavior of the different occupants. And if we only apply for a very small multifamily building, it's very risky to guarantee the performance. But I can go back on that after if you want. And if we look at the investment cost for each dwellings, it will roughly go between 15 and 20 kilo euros per apartment. And with that, normally when we look at the deep renovation project, normally you do the facade insulation, you do the boiler replacement, sometimes you have to do the roof. Because we are in the private sector, it's hard always to get the windows changed, because everyone changes windows, not very in different ways, but we try to, if there is some still some one glazing windows, we try at least to change that, because it's in 2021 we should at least all have double glazing windows. And at the end, it's a package about 20 kilo euro per apartment. And when we look at the different grants we can have, because it's very a key aspect when we are dealing with private sector, all these grants can trigger a renovation project, because it has to be voted by the majority of co-owners. And when we present different scenario of work, if we go to the more ambitious scenario with the highest energy performance, it goes also with the highest level of grants, and sometimes we can get the vote thanks to these grants. And there is two types of grants. You have the public grant, so a new one which is called MaPrimeRénov' in France, which is just a new name for existing grant with different prerequisites. You have the EcoPrêt, which is basically a zero interest rate loan, but it's really complex to set, and no one uses it in multifamily. Almost no one uses it in multifamily buildings. So sometimes it's a point of attention, but it's important to get grants. It's interesting, but it has to be quite simple for everyone to use it. Otherwise, when it's too complicated, no one uses it. And you also have the private grants, which are white certificate. In France, we call it CEE, Certificat d'économie d'énergie. And all the initiative, the recent initiative of the government are all putting this on the private sector. So a lot of effort are done to get this white certificate being one of the first flow of grants. And in some places, it can cover an average 10% of the cost of the work. So it's interesting with the white certificate. And what is interesting on what we do sometimes, because when we apply and we can sign an energy performance contract, there is a bonus on the energy performance contract. And I put a table and an example on the right. So it's a current project we are working on, multifamily building in the south of Lyon. So the construction work are almost done. It will be finished in 1 month. And when you look at only travaux, it's the work, you see that you could have 80,000 euros just for considering the white certificate. And with the CPA, it's EPC in France. So you can have 44,000 euros in bonus. Just because you are signing an energy performance contract, which is quite interesting. So when you combine the two, it can cover 14% of your your cost of work. And the line in light blue just behind, it's the new bonus, because the government is pushing on that. And now they reinforced the bonus if you do an energy performance contract. And now it can cover 80% of your work. So it's becoming more and more interesting to do a deep renovation and then to apply for an energy performance contract. And that's quite clever from the government point of view, because it's really hard to get to be sure that you have all the energy saving that was promised during the design phases. So when you do the energy performance contract, you ensure that you will have your energy saving, which is very interesting and very safe for the different owners. We can go to the other slide. And so I was thinking about what we always say that it's quite difficult to refurbish in multi-family building, and how a one-stop shop can solve some issues. And the main aspect, and so we face these issues in Turnkey Retrofit project that Jonathan explained before. So to me, when I look at what are the main barriers for multi-family building to get a deep renovation project, is because it's there is a lot of different owners which have different priorities, different investment priorities, and also different view on what should be done in their building. So it's basically an issue about democracy inside the multi-family building. So everyone, that's a global deep renovation project has to be voted by a large majority of co-owners. So it's quite difficult, and sometimes there is no legal obligation to do so. At least in France. In some other countries, there is some obligation. So it's quite hard to get everyone aligned on one type of scenario, one project, and so on. And so it's about how to get a positive vote for every co-owner. And the other aspect is also linked to that. It's that no one is really responsible for the project. So if you look at the picture I put on the right part of the slide, there is a lot of different players. So for instance, you have some of the public and private players at the left, which are here to advise the different multi-family building with the co-owners, do some thermography, infrared thermography, just to see if your building is efficient or not, trying to convince the co-owner that there is a need to do a project. But at the end, you have the co-owners, you have the board of co-owners, which are the representative of the co-owners, who are in relation with the property manager. Then the property manager has some contractual relation with either the project management, architects, surveyor, thermal study engineers, and then at the end you have the construction company. And no one is responsible for the refurbishment projects. By that I mean that within the board of co-owners, if you have someone who feels responsible for that, then you are quite sure that your project will go and maybe be voted. But otherwise, it's really hard to get a project, such a project. I mean, a deep renovation project. It's really hard to get voted, and same for the property manager, because in France, a property manager usually manage around 30 multi-family buildings. So it's really hard for him to have the time to do one or two deep renovation projects in the same time. So he basically doesn't have the time to do that. So we need a strong motivation for the assembly of the co-owner, either for some of the person of the board of the co-owner, to really follow the project, and then to get the project voted. And when it's voted, then it goes very easier, because you go with professionals, so you have the architect, the surveyor, and then the construction company, and it's way more simple. one of the aspects which is linked to what I said just before, that property manager cannot handle several deep renovation. It's also the same for construction company. I don't know how it is in different countries, but in France, it's quite hard to get some worker in the construction company. So there is also a lack in that. And sometimes it can reduce the speed of the refurbishment project. So I see that all the time because I'm really linked to a lot of small and medium companies, construction companies, and in their top issue is human resources and how to get good workers on their work. And I just put it in light gray for the last main barrier to me, but a lot of person talk about cost of renovation and so on. And for my experience and what I see in the different projects we are active on, it's not really a big issue because there is a lot of funding right now, and it's also depend on the revenue of the different people. And there is it's not such a big barrier to me. And I think I don't know if there is the pictures. No, you have to put the picture. No, there is not a picture, but I don't know if it's possible to put it on or not. Mara, no? Okay, well, just to explain at the end, I just wanted to show you the two example of what we have done recently, but it's just basically it's just picture of building before and after the war, so just to show that it's possible to get a good multifamily building renovation with an EPC, and we have done that a few times. And it's possible because some people doubt that it is possible to do such EPC in multifamily buildings. So I say, yes, it's feasible. It's hard, yes, but at the end, everyone is happy for that, and especially the co-owners. Thank you for everyone. And if you have some question, I can reply just before, after. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. It's really interesting to get that multifamily building perspective. So really interesting presentation. I'd now like to pass the floor to Kristina Klimovich. Kristina?
Hi, Mara. Thank you so much. And indeed, that was very fascinating presentation from Hugo. I've been following Operene for a while, but only online. So it's really good to see you and put a face to a name. And I will talk about a particular example of a one-stop shop that we've been pioneering in the city of Olot in Catalonia in Spain under the umbrella of the Europeast project. And just a couple of words to complement Mara's introduction about G&E Finance. We are a high impact investment company and we're focused on home renovation programs. And currently we're leading 8 projects and we're part of some as well. Most of the projects are funded by the European Commission and all of them have something in common, that all of these projects are focusing on making buildings better, meaning more energy efficient, adding renewable energy technologies, improving accessibility of those buildings in various countries. Oh, thank you. And during the work on the Europeast project, we had a chance to test several theories. We also got a chance to discuss with many actors from various programs in Europe as well, and to analyze existing policy in order to come up with an effective renovation formula, which really, in our opinion, comprises of technical assistance, which in fact doesn't have to be so technical. This assistance is needed to provide homeowners with expertise, with knowledge, and with support to better choose the measures, to choose the right contractors for their works. As we just heard from Hugo, it's definitely a challenge, and often many homeowners lack trust in the contractors that will do the works. Then the second part of our formula is affordable finance, and by affordable finance, in our case, we mean that's financing that is long-term, And that integrates also subsidies at the level that the national government and the regional government provides those subsidies. And lastly, the third element of this formula is smart funding. And smart funding is really the de-risking side of the financing in order to ensure that we can use public funds in a smart way to support the private actors entering into the space. And altogether, these three elements create trust to renovate. And trust to renovate is really fundamental for homeowners to make the decision to actually go for this energy renovation, because at the end of the day, it's all about stimulating the demand for renovation from the ground up. And next one, please. And the Europace project, next slide, please. And the Europace project, just one before. Okay, thank you very much. So the Europace project really brings together two parts of the equation. One is the co-design of the one-stop shop together with a public authority, and then it's the innovation and financing. And so on the right-hand side, you can see the 8 partners that are involved in the project together with us. And in terms of the one-stop shop co-design, a couple of things were clear to us: that it must be a public-private partnership. And that's also, I really like something Jonathan said earlier in his presentation, that every city should have a one-stop shop. So completely agree, and it's very important for cities to start thinking in terms of public-private partnerships that will also enable their one-stop shops to be economically self-sustainable, meaning they will remain there even after the project's end and even after a particular influx of public funding has dried up. And also the one-stop shop, in our opinion, should be laser focused on, again, demand generation from the ground up. And lastly, the financing piece. In the Europace project specifically, we developed a new type of financing, and we adapted a financing that came from the US PACE financing, and that's why the project is called Europace, and it's affordable and long-term. And we also explored this attachment to a property with what we call home-based financing. So I'll speak about that in a couple of minutes. Next slide. Thank you. And so the role of the public authority could certainly vary during a public-private partnership composition. In our case specifically, our path followed an establishment of an entity to operate a home renovation program, specifically through a public-private partnership. In our case, it was a foundation. Then we designed a financing platform. We launched the program itself, which had a different branding. The program is called HolaDomus. And then we focused on the development of a pipeline of projects. And next one. So HolaDomus really brings all these things from our home renovation formula together. It brings trusted contractors, which were validated by the program. It brings affordable financing, customer support, and also technical support that certainly helps to lower project risk and also provide a lot of trust to the homeowners. Next one. And a couple of simple steps in a typical home renovation project. These are not too dissimilar from the ones that Hugo presented before me. So it all starts with an initial assessment with an energy audit, then goes to technical solution, financing if needed, and also subsidy advice, then project execution, verification by the program, and repayment of the financing if it was obtained. And next one. So currently to date in HolaDomus program, the program mobilized 1.4 million. And at the moment, the majority of the projects are still single measure projects, but we are focusing now on increasing the so-called packages of projects. And at the moment, also 67% of projects are done on single unit homes. And that's also indicative of the current asset classes is present in that area of Catalonia. Most of the users rate the program quite highly, which is a great testament to the fact that the office of HolaDomus is doing a great job and really serving the customer, which is at the end of the day is key, because customers are the ones who talk to their neighbors, talk to their friends, and help us promote the program. And next slide. Also, getting in touch with contractors and getting in touch with the right contractors is very key, and then properly focusing through the validation procedure to ensure that contractors are meeting the requirements of the program, and to also ensure that contractors are subscribing to our customer protection policies, which are really important because, again, so many homeowners have had a bad experience with contractors, and that's why it's one of the key priorities of the program to ensure that all experiences are positive, and so more people will focus on home renovation. And next slide. And these are just a couple of examples of renovated homes. Of course, you can see some facade work, you can see some window work, you can see some vertical solar panels here. The next one. And a couple of words about financing. So currently, we provide financing as GNE Finance in HolaDomus program. It's a home renovation loan. The loan size is quite varied from 5 to 100,000, and it's 100% upfront. So the loan size can vary depending on the type of project, and the key element that the homeowners are really responding to is the monthly installment or monthly repayment starting at 39 euros. So that's really something homeowners can often relate to and compare it to their other monthly expenses. In the next slide. So since I mentioned earlier that in the Europace project, we explored the new financing type, that's so-called home-based financing, which means that the financing is not just attached to a homeowner, but attached to a property. And first we started with a market readiness assessment and looking into EU 28 and trying to figure out which countries have a more suitable legal and fiscal framework for such financing. And so we learned that Spain, Portugal, Germany, Romania, and a couple of other countries were well suited for it. And then we focused on a couple of other 4 countries to actually implement this type of financing. And next slide. And in Spain, not surprisingly, this is the country where GNE Finance has our head office. We proposed a Europace amendment in the Spanish Parliament under climate change law that really creates the ability for us to be able to create this home-based financing. Financing that's attached to property and not an individual, and it's a non-fiscal measure, which is also quite important because, as we learned during our research, trying to amend existing fiscal structures can be quite challenging, and therefore there is not always political will to do so. So in this case, we're focusing on the non-fiscal measure, and the amendment is still pending at the national level in Spain. In the next slide. And at the moment, we're already starting to think about scaling this program. And in fact, not just thinking about it, but in the Basque Country, in Opengela, the program has been active for a year now. And just recently, we've created a managing entity for the program, which is a public-private partnership and a foundation that will run a very effective and economically self-sustainable program over the next foreseeable future. And at the same time, we're also replicating this one-stop shop model in Regenerate project, also a Horizon 2020 funded project. And here we're focusing on the islands, on Menorca, Ibiza, and Palma de Mallorca. And our goal here is to create again, kind of this combination of technical assistance and affordable financing in a local one-stop shop. And next slide. And that is actually my closing slide, just a couple of words on scaling one-stop shops in order to ensure that renovation wave happens. And in order to galvanize this renovation wave, there are a couple of things that I want to suggest that we focus on. And one is that strong policy support. We need a signal to the market. With mandatory minimum energy performance requirements, that's certainly important, especially for multifamily buildings. Fiscal incentives have shown to be a very successful mechanism as well, with an example of eco bonus and super bonus in Italy. And we also need to optimize the use of subsidies and grants in order to ensure that vulnerable groups can be supported and that this transition can be fully inclusive. And lastly, it's the smart use of public funds for de-risking. And de-risking could take several forms. In our case, it's taking a form of a guarantee fund in order to incentivize private funders to enter the space. And in terms of the models, we believe we need to attract more private players to really develop those economically self-sustainable models and design public-private partnerships, because those public-private partnerships can really stimulate new jobs and build an ecosystem of professionals involving architects, engineers, installers, and really provide local jobs to them, and also galvanize the whole space by bringing together the supply and the demand side as well. So I'll pause here. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to more questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristina, and thank you to all of the speakers for your wonderful presentations. I'd now like to move on to the discussion. So we've received several questions from the audience. I'd like to start with the first. This one is for Jonathan. Can you give examples of successful one-stop shops which have carried on after the end of their funding period? And do they have any common denominators?
All right, thank you, Mara. Of course, I think there are many good examples. I mean, most of the ones we analyze, they are not reliant on or not solely reliant on public support. I mean, Operene is a great example, even if they include, I mean, public support in the model and for renovations and so on. But I think there are many good examples, and a common denominator must be that they all have a clear business case, that they know. I mean, just like a normal business, you need to know what is my market, what kind of service do I provide, and what are the revenue streams that will keep us going. And I think that is clear. And I think Better Home in Denmark, which most of you know, and I've talked about in the past, but that is really a model that was created by 4 private companies with the ambition to increase the renovation activity, and their revenue stream was then, or they basically saw that if we increase renovation, that will lead to more revenue, because in Denmark most people prefer the Danish brands, but also I think the Superhome in Ireland and Octave in France, again, different owners, but they have also been, just like Operene, able to have a model that provides deep renovation services and keep going. I mean, not just in a research stage as we are in Turnkey, but really keep going for, I don't know, for Superhome's probably been around for 10 years now. But I'm not sure I agree with the statement that it needs to, or it wasn't a statement, but I don't agree with the fact that it needs to be self-sufficient. I think especially enabling deep renovations, I mean, that is somewhat of a public service. I mean, it contributes to something, a greater good, and if the models have partly public support, I don't see a problem with that. But yeah, to summarize, a clear business case and collaboration with key players.
Okay, thank you. We have another question for Hugo. How are additional savings achieved in the EPC cases you were describing?
What? Sorry, I didn't get
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah, so how are additional savings achieved in the EPC cases you were describing during your presentation?
What do you mean by additional savings?
I think energy savings and cost savings because of EPCs.
Yes, just to explain that, EPC is just a contract. So you do the deep renovation project as it was designed, and normally once the job is done, there is no obligation of having real savings. So it's during the design phases, it's only theoretical phase saving. You explain that to the different co-owners, and then you say, basically, with these works, you should have between 30, 40, or 50% of savings or energy savings. The EPC is just here to guarantee that the savings, that the theoretical savings would be real at the end of the work and during a certain period of times. So there is no additional savings, but there is just a transformation between theoretical savings and real savings. And when we start the operating and maintenance aspect, once the work has been done, and usually an EPC contract in multi-housing building go up to 10 years, not more. And during this period, you check every year and you do an annual consumption, a check of the annual consumption. And then you see if you have your saving or not. And if you don't have your savings, then the other party of the contract will pay the difference, or sometimes a bonus or a malus. It depends. And so, to me, there is no more saving if you do an EPC, but it's just there is real savings, and sometimes you don't. There is a lot of deep renovation project where you don't see any savings at all. Sometimes because you do your theoretical calculation during the design phases, it's based on the mandatory scenarios for just checking the thermal regulation of each country, but then it doesn't really apply to your building. So that's just the difference on EPC. So real saving. I hope I understand the question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Kristina, we have a question here directed for you. Can you speak on the possibilities of one-stop shop replication? You had mentioned that briefly in your presentation, so I hope you can give more details on that.
Thanks, Mara. Yeah, absolutely. So in our case, for instance, we designed the one-stop shop concept that is rooted in the public-private partnership of working together with the cities. And right now, we're also replicating it in 2 other places in Spain, in the Basque Country, where we have created another foundation together with the Basque government in order to launch a number of home renovation one-stop shops and neighborhood offices there. That's the first example. And the second example is in the Balearic Islands, also in Spain, where we're working with the island government specifically to also create a tailored services based on the one-stop shop model. But I think the replication can go even beyond that. You know, that's just that's G&E's current replication efforts. I think in general, the one-stop shop model is a model that so many programs are using now, and we're seeing more and more of it at the European level. And Jonathan's study is a testament to that, that the one-stop shop is really starting to become a buzzword, in some cases a bit negatively, but you know, I usually use the word of home renovation or hub or whatever you'd like to use, but as long as it's an integration, you know, of services that helps speed up the process and galvanize the market, I mean, then it is a one-stop shop. So I do fully subscribe again to the fact that every city or every region should have a one-stop shop or a centralizing point that can stimulate both supply and demand. And that's also something that we do in advising public authorities all across Europe in our projects. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Jonathan. An audience member noticed that your diagrams do not include operations. And by that, they mean making sure that the homeowner knows how to operate the home more efficiently after their retrofit has been done and that they're motivated to do so. Do you think One Stop Shop should be doing more here? And they specify, especially in the cases where heating systems are being changed.
Yes, could I first say something on the replication?
Of course.
Because that is what we're doing in the turnkey, and I think I agree with everything Kristina said, but I also think that it is possible to replicate certain parts of one-stop shops, but in the end, they will be rather different in different cities, because in a city in Denmark, you will have different needs and different different collaboration and so on because of the context than you will have in a city in France, because you can, for example, the financial packages will be different, for example, and what kind of models are in demand. And in our case, in Ireland, there are more single family buildings, so the model is focusing more on that, and there are more people interested in the deep renovations. While in France it's or in Spain it's more multifamily buildings and all types of renovations basically. But that was just about it. The other one was to also influence the behavior, if I got it right. And I think that is an important part of a good one-stop shop. And if you have an energy performance contract, as Hugo was talking, I think that is automatic part of it, because you need to keep in touch until the contract ends. But I think also in otherwise, I think there is need for a follow-up to both to make sure that the people are satisfied with the work, that everything was installed in the right way, and also that, of course, HVAC or heating system, the occupants must know how to operate this, of course, to ensure that we don't have some kind of performance gap because people confuse how to use the building at best. Yeah.
Right, of course. Understood. Hugo, we have another question for you. An audience member asked how long it takes to renovate a multifamily building in your experience.
Well, so you have different phases. You are usually, when you do a deep renovation project, it starts with some kind of energy diagnosis. So first, the assembly of co-owners have to vote if they agree to pay for an energy diagnosis. So there is a general assembly of the co-owner every year. So every year you can vote for something. So usually you have 1 year to get the energy diagnosis done. Then you have to select the design team and accept a bid for a design team. So it's basically another year, 2 years. Once you have once the job is done in the design phases, then you have to ask price for all the different construction work and so on. It can go to around 6 months, and then you select your construction company and you do the work. And the work, it can go between, I would say, 6 months to depend on the size of the multifamily building. I have some projects for 1 year, sometimes 1 year and a half. So if you want to do the whole project from the energy diagnosis to the end of the work, it can between 2 years and a half and 3 years. So it's a long, you need to have some endurance, and it's a long run. And then you can go for the operating and maintenance phases. So it can go up to 10 years. But after that, there is no more. There is just it's easier in terms of job. So the more difficult, from my point of view, the more difficult is to get a vote for an energy diagnosis. It doesn't cost a lot of money, so it's really easy. And then, I don't know if it's a French aspect or not, but it's really hard for an assembly of co-owners to only pay for intellectual study. So just to pay for the design phases. There is a lot of co-owners who don't really understand the aspect of that, and they just expect to get a price for construction work, but they don't really understand that you need to totally study their building to get the right renovation program, and then ask the company to get that. So that's one of the, it's more about the co-owner. And I also have a comment about all the platform stuff. It's okay if we are young. I expect I'm still young to apply on the platform, but most of the co-owner, they are way more aged than us, and it's sometimes it's difficult for them to go on the platform. So I would put a nuance on the aspect of one-stop shop, only online or only digital, because you can lose a lot of people. And to be a co-owner, at least to be owner, you need to have a certain age. If you are just a young people and you just buy your apartment, you won't have the money to pay for the refurbishment, so you will vote no for the refurbishment project. So there is a range of age where you are happy to do the renovation work. When you are too old, you just say, please leave me alone. I want to finish my life there, and then you can do your work. I often hear that, so that's why I'm telling you. And so it's quite difficult to get everything digital also. 2 years and a half and some human relationship. That's to advise.
Okay, so what I took from that is that it can take a long time, but really it has a big impact, and it's
Yes.
worth it to invest in the renovations. Okay, well, relating to your question about the online platform, we have another question here asking what part of the service, the OSS service, can be online and what shouldn't be and should be direct contact. This is open to each and every one of you. I don't know if you would all like to speak. Maybe Kristina, you'd like to start?
Sure, thank you. I think during this last year, during the COVID year, we've learned quite a bit that many things can be done online, but we still also learned that some things just cannot be done online. And in our experience, the initial diagnosis or the initial assessment of the home can certainly be done to some extent online, simply with a phone. And many of us have had online doctor's appointments. And why shouldn't we do similar strategies and should implement similar strategies for buildings? So I think that's really one of the elements that should be scaled up. The sooner the better. And then the other element that we learned is that many homeowners still lack trust to actually do all the services online. And I think that speaks to Hugo's point about sometimes the age, but sometimes also just the trust, that we need that relationship, sitting down in front of somebody and looking them in the eye and seeing the contract and seeing what's going on, and that it's a real office. And sometimes homeowners have other issues besides energy. And so then it's the role of the office to also ascertain those issues, you know, not just the diagnosis of the building, but also of the homeowners, and especially with vulnerable groups, you know, sometimes it's the safety and accessibility, and it may not be obvious at the beginning, but during the conversation that becomes obvious. So I think basically, to summarize, the initial assessment of the building, we want to do more of that online, having learned from the various apps and the various ways of programs have adapted over the past year, but we still need a human component, potential an in-person one, to really build trust with the community.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? If not, we can move on. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. No, I agree, and I think as much as possible should be online. And I think the pitch of selling in the idea of a deep renovation, for example, it can be that we need to have like the personal connection there to really sell the idea. And also, I know from my experience, when I try to call, the phone company or internet utility guys, they always refer me to the website, and it annoys me. So I think the availability of having a personal contact, but at the same time, that will become more expensive because you need more employee in the one-stop shop. But also on the on-site visit, I think if it's possible to have, as much energy performance certificate data and data from other types of building registries automated to the energy auditor, so they already have like a template with pre-filled data. So when they come to the buildings, they can really just check if this data is correct and correct the data. I think that, at least for single family buildings, that allows them to save a lot of time, and I think it's possible to them to reduce the cost there a bit. All right, that was all.
I can just add one thing, because as Kristina said, during the COVID period, there were a lot of things that we had to do it online. And for instance, all the the assembly of corner went online. It was not usually, it was not possible at the beginning by law. So they had to change the law to admit that an assembly of corner can be online. And we saw from the construction company side that there is a drop of the project voted because they don't vote yes online. So when you do the assembly of corner online, and as Jonathan said, when you have to pitch a price, an idea, a project, or whatever, sometimes it might be an old game, but sometimes you need to have the real contact and just to see the reaction of someone, just to adapt your communication and so on. There is a lot of things that can be done online, but during the commercial aspect, to me, it has to be at least a little face-to-face, and we experienced that because a lot of projects are not voted at the moment, and we are still in a lockdown in France right now. So the online assembly continues.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think COVID pandemic aside, it's important to cater to all ages, all types of characters. So I do agree with that with all of you. Kristina, we have a question for you. Who are the investors who invest into the public-private partnerships you were discussing during your presentation?
So public-private partnership is typically just an arrangement or an agreement between the public sector, which in our case is either a city government or it's a regional government, and a private actor. And in this case, a private actor is G&E Finance, but it can be other types of private actors who provide various services for a one-stop shop. And then the public-private partnership is operationalized in an entity, and that entity can be participated also by a public authority and a private sector company. So in this case, it's really directly would be on the public side, the investor is the city or region, and they can invest their resources, but also pledge certain subsidies, certain grants. And there is in fact a plethora of choices of how these things can be structured depending on the local law. In our case, it's G&E. As we're an impact company, our investors are impact investors. So this is, then we participate together with cities and regions. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. Hugo, I have a question directed to you. So an audience member asks if there's been any discussion regarding what renovation materials should be made from. The European Commission's Renovation Wave talks about the promotion of green infrastructure and the use of organic building materials that can store carbon, such as sustainably sourced wood. So would you be able to speak on this?
Yeah, because it also interests me, so it's okay. I'm okay to speak about that. Just to be clear, if we look at housing association and public market, I mean, we also renovate some school and some or educational building. Public buyer, they are really focused on the material you put on your building, the sustainability of the material, also the energy. So they are really looking for wood boiler, sorry. And it's really interesting for me to apply on this market. But when I go to the private sector and the multifamily building, they always go to the cheapest project. So they can go they can choose the highest scenario in terms of energy saving, but inside this, they will choose the cheapest material. And I'm sorry for that, but that's the way it works. And everyone, I think when we buy on the internet, we want to pay the lowest price. And when we look at an energy refurbishment, we do the same. So when we buy our clothes, we should pay attention where it was made, and so on. And you have the same for your construction project. And I would say we are basically humans. When we see a shirt which is cheap, we buy the cheap shirt, and it's the same for the insulation product. And I see that as we had to put some mandatory barrier just to change the habits in the in the private sector. Otherwise, it will not go by itself, just because every corner think about the planet. I'm sorry, I might be a bit rough, but that's the truth in the private sector. In the public sector, I'm way more optimistic, and they really are concerned by that. They ask us for carbon calculation of the construction work and so on. I have a lot of projects where I put a wood boiler and I put a wood facade, even if it's not very easy, because when you have a building that are open to public, there is a strong rule for in case of fire. So you have all the technical controllers that are really afraid by wood products in the building where you can, which is open to a lot of public. But when you look at the private sector, they go for polystyrene insulation for external aspect. They go for gas boiler because it's cheapest. It's the cheapest energy for them. And I'm afraid that we need to go to the law to change the habit. And we see that right now in Lyon, because the mayor of Lyon become green at the next election. So they start to change the instruction of their all the urbanism authorization, and they ask for sustainable products. And it's quite complicated to get to pass the project with polystyrene. So they are changing slowly, but it's about regulation. And the other aspect is that if everyone wants some sustainable product, there is not enough sustainable products for the market. So that's another issue, because I have some projects. I have a big construction site will start this summer, and 6 months ago we had 1 month delay for wood fiber, and now we have 3 to 4 months delay for the same product, because the demand is increasing and there is a lot of tension on material. There is a big increase in material in general, and more in sustainable product. That's my answer.
Thank you. Yeah, well, with the increase of in demand, there should be an increase in supply. So hopefully we will move towards that direction.
I hope so, but watch out to not took all the Romanian wood. That's the issue we saw with IKEA, because the lack of wood, so they start to cut the primary forest in Romania, and they were put in trial for that. And we don't want to do the same mistake in the construction sector. And there is a lot of discussion about which wood and the origin of the wood we would like to use in the construction. And I'm lucky because I only work in renovation projects, so we use less material. But if you look in new construction, it's way more important to use less concrete and more wood. And depend on the origin of the wood also. Thank you.
Understood. Then the industry must invest in R&D really to find new sustainable and green building materials. All right, we have another question. This one, maybe Jonathan, you can answer, but it is open to all. What would you say are the top 3 guidelines for setting up successful one-stop shops, given your experience with benchmarking?
Yes, thank you. It's a good question. I would probably start with doing some kind of business model canvas, as I showed you before, to really identify, first of all, identify which are the actors I could collaborate with in the city. Can I make up a team with the local banks, with the public authorities, with some local companies or suppliers to really set up a good team? And then map out some kind of a business case. How can we get this running? And I think if you have that, and if you include a bunch of innovative ideas and focus on, sustainable and deep renovations, I think there's a lot of funding both in the countries and in the EU through the, for example, the ELENA technical finance thing. I think there is possible to get funding to really set up the one-stop shop and get it going. And I think map out the idea, set out who you want to make the idea reality with, and then
Okay,
I'll complement that answer a bit. No, I completely agree. Business model canvas is really a useful tool, and it's something that's that should be done more and more. And setting up the right business model, meaning also understanding your stakeholders and what do they need, is very important. I'll also go further and say that understanding people's needs in your particular locality is also key, because as we learned, in some cases the needs are not obvious, and we only learn about them after several discussions or round tables with homeowners. For instance, on Balearic Islands, humidity is a big issue because many buildings were built between 1960 and 70, and then there was absolutely almost no insulation. But also beyond that, it's really the gutters. Many buildings don't have proper gutters, and what happens is that a water drips from a window and people have to repaint their building every year again and again. And so these types of little things that you really cannot find out by research are also important. And lastly, it's also the ecosystem of professionals, ensuring that you have the right professionals you work with. And for us, we focus on validation procedures. That really is a three-step process to validate the right professionals, and also to support with possibly training materials others who weren't validated in the first phase as well.
Understood. Thank you. We also have another question for you, Kristina. How are you planning to sustain your operation after funding ends? Do you have long-term financing and income possibilities of the physical and interactive offices?
So for us, that's really the key element to have the right business model. And many of the programs have started with Horizon 2020 funding, which is of course very useful. And there is some more funding left in Horizon 2020, right? And Horizon Europe is coming on board. And Jonathan mentioned ELENA technical assistance as well. So there will be other funds, of course, with the new generation, next generation EU funding coming in. So of course, it's important to have in mind those public funding possibilities, but at the same time to have a good business model. And that's what we're relying on primarily, is over time to be able to phase out the public assistance, as we're assuming it will be also dwindling down at some point, and for the programs to bring in their own revenues to the table. And that can be done by also tapping into the professionals who do the work as well. In the beginning, we actually decided not to charge homeowners fees, because to generate more interest, to galvanize the program, etc. And then in terms of the financing, currently GNE provides financing in Spain. We're a lender there, and we provide advisory services outside of Spain. But yes, indeed, there's a really tremendous need to start thinking about financing over the long term, especially to assess which part will be covered by grants and subsidies and which part homeowners may need to get affordable financing for. And in many cases, in our experience, homeowners are more reluctant to get loans for very small amounts. They would rather fund it out of pocket. And so the program should really offer a menu of services, because there is no one option that fits all. And it's, again, I'm coming back to the doctor's office, because there's never one option that fits all, right? There's always options to discuss. And so it's the same with financing. It should be transparent and providing several possibilities to a homeowner is important.
Right. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Kristina, and thank you to all of the speakers for your insights today. We're getting close to the end of the session, so I'd also like to thank the audience for your questions and for your attendance. And if you enjoyed the session, we'd like to invite you to our next webinar in the Achieving the 2030 Climate Goals series, which will be focused on multifamily building renovations, and it will be held on July 8th. The registration link for today's session will be sent to all of the attendees, along with the registration link for the next webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and we're looking forward to seeing you on July 8th. Bye-bye.